Hey friends, it's Rebecca Halliday from readingrebels.com and Riverbend Community School, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the knowledge gap. I am reading the most amazing book by Natalie Wexler, and it really is diving deep into the science of reading and what's really going on when students are not learning to read and what an impact that has on our society, on kids. So I had the perfect example that happened today, and you'll see in my little lesson with my 3.5-year-old and her best friend Hannah. This is what was happening. They were wanting to know what all of these books behind me, I'm in my classroom here in Riverview, New Brunswick. What does this book say? What does this book say? What does this book say? And I'm here every Sunday, and I spend most of the day here getting ready for the week ahead. And I was telling them the titles, and they were really interested in this one. And the easy thing would be for me to say, just go ahead and look at the pictures. And this is what I want you to take away from our conversation today. And I want to give you a little quote from Natalie Wexler's book. We say often to young students, just look at the pictures, and that looking at pictures is reading. Looking at pictures is a wonderful pre-reading skill, but it's not reading. We can start to help students with their literacy from the moment they are born. So when my 3.5-year-old today wanted to know about what was in this book, instead of me just saying, go ahead and look at the pictures, I have to do my lesson plan, I stopped and I read to them, because here's what I want you to understand. Here's my wisdom to impart upon you today. I'm going to read you a quote. The more knowledge a child starts with, the more knowledge a child will acquire. And I know that sounds really obvious, but oftentimes children starting in kindergarten are really far behind their same-age peers for a number of reasons. They might have a language deficit issue, meaning dyslexia or a reading difficulty. They may come from a background where they are not exposed to rich language or rich texts from the moment they are born. We need to be, as parents and teachers, filling children's minds with knowledge and vocabulary and exposure to rich content and rich vocabulary all the time. And that comes through exposing them to texts every single day. Because when kids start in kindergarten, up to a year behind their same age peers in language development and exposure to rich vocabulary from books, they are going to stay behind perpetually throughout their academic career. So if they read more or are read to more, they will understand and retain information better. Because like Velcro, this is such a good quote, knowledge sticks best to other related knowledge. So basically the idea is if kids know a lot, they're going to keep knowing more. If kids don't know a lot, they will continue to not know very much. That gap widens and widens and widens. This is called the Matthew effect. It's sort of like, here's this other quote, snowballing knowledge accumulation of kids who start out with more, learn more. And kids who start out with less knowledge acquire less knowledge. It's like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer kind of idea. So that gap just continues to widen when kids start school as early as kindergarten. So when you tell a little kid, just look at the pictures, or if you allot a ton of time in kindergarten for silent reading and the kids are just reading the pictures, that's time wasted that you could be filling their head and exposing them to super rich content. Today was a perfect example of that. I sat with my little girl, Junie, and her friend Hannah, who are 3.5 years old, and we talked about the word gravity and what that meant. And we talked of different words that they may not have been exposed to if I hadn't read them this book. If I just said, go look at the pictures, we talked about gravity for an hour after. We pretended we were astronauts, even the word astronauts. We talked about the word ukulele. They need to be exposed and talk about this kind of vocabulary every single day. The longer this Matthew effect, I'm looking here because I have these notes from this book. If you can read The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler, please do. The longer the Matthew effect continues, the harder it is to reverse. So if our kids have this language gap and this knowledge gap, it's not just about words and decoding and vocabulary. if they don't have a lot of knowledge about tons of different topics, from social studies content to science content to civics to arts, they should be exposed to as much of this from as early on as possible. The harder it is to reverse. So you get a kid who in grade 4 might have finally cracked the code and is reading words, but they have not enough background knowledge to make meaning out of what they're reading. This is where we get into real trouble. So she says, envelop kids in a knowledge-rich environment as early as possible. And that's what I did today with my little people. I just wanted to encourage you as parents and teachers to do the same thing. Rather than, this is so good. Rather than giving kids simple material that they can read on their own, they must listen to complex reading with rich content and vocabulary, and then speak and discuss deeply about what they're reading, the words that they're reading, and then if they're able to, say in grade 2, grade 1 even, write about what they just read. So they really have a chance to let that new knowledge sink in and play with that knowledge and talk about that knowledge. And the other thing she talks about a lot is organizing your read alouds by topic. So not just teaching main idea or inferencing as a skill. That kind of practice is not effective when it comes to building knowledge-rich little people. We want to organize. So for example, this month in my classroom, it's just been Women's History Month. We've read nonfiction text, fiction text, articles, everything having to do with really being entrenched in this topic of women's history. And so she says, if we can organize our read alouds by topic rather than skill, they can be exposed to the content through multiple texts. Then if they can be exposed to that, they themselves will start to be able to read harder and harder books because they're just absorbing new information. If you have a struggling reader who can't decode words yet, they need to be even more entrenched in knowledge-rich content, or rich content that really, really exposes them to a ton of language concepts that they can hear, that they can follow along in apps like Epic. Just because a kiddo is a slow decoder, a struggling reader, doesn't mean that they should only be reading books at their level. They need to be exposed to high level content every single day across a plethora of subject areas. So go ahead and check out my little read aloud with Junie and Hannah, my 3.5-year-old and her best friend today, to show sort of what we did when and how valuable it was for them to actually read this book rather than just be given it and look at the pictures. Stop, drop, and read. We know all those. We've done that for years now, but then we need to take it further and talk about the content that's in these books and have rich conversations, collect the words that they don't know, teach them those meanings, keep those words up all over your learning space if you can, put sticky notes in your home of words they don't know and use that word in their speaking every day. So if you had the word desolation up on a sticky note because you read it somewhere together and they don't know what it means, put it up on your wall, on your fridge, and ask them to use it in a sentence before you give them their cereal. Or, the idea is build up their vocabulary and their knowledge at all costs. That is all from me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to my rant. The knowledge gap is real. We need to address this in our readers and in our children at all costs. It is imperative for their success. readingrebels.com if you want to know more about my program. Bye.
I can see you.
Hi, friends. How are you today? I am here with my friends Hannah and Junie. This is my daughter and this is her best friend. And I am in my school here at Riverbend Community School. And there we go. I have something to tell you about. So these little gals were looking all along this book ledge behind me, weren't you guys? And they were saying, what does this say? What does this say? What's this book called? And they wanted to know the title of every book. And I want to talk to you today about the knowledge gap. So I'm going to read this story because I'm here doing work on a Sunday like I do every Sunday. And it would be way easier for me to just say to the girls, just look at the pictures. And a lot of people will say that reading pictures is reading. And looking at pictures in a book is wonderful, but looking at pictures in a book doesn't teach a child to read or build their knowledge. And I want to talk to you about that today, and that's my topic called the knowledge gap. And it's so important as educators and parents that we understand what that means. But for now, instead of letting these little beauties look at the pictures, I'm going to read them the book. How's that sound? This book is called The Darkest Dark.